Okay, so how do you see emotions then? Do you feel that, because it seems like the direct path is just about going to bliss immediately. You're saying if
Well,
you
why would you not want to go to bliss immediately? Why would you want to go there slowly if you could go there quickly?
well, it's because you can't go there directly, really, or I mean, so okay, so the meditation
You
this morning,
can.
you say like, oh, just notice that your awareness and you're open and your peace, right? So in that sense, you're trying to change people's emotions to be directly in that, right?
No, no, we're not interfering with emotions or thoughts. I don't think I did, and I hope I didn't suggest that this morning tampering with one's experience, with one's thoughts or feelings or emotions. I just suggested going directly to the experience to which we refer when we say, I am. And I made it very clear that we didn't have to, in the experience, I am depressed. But we didn't have to turn away from the depression, but we simply had to emphasize the I am.
Being with I am has the emotion of peace, you've described it as, right? Or love.
It's innate. The I am is innately peaceful. Yes, it's undisturbable, imperturbable. Yes, it's like the empty space of this room. It cannot be disturbed. Yes.
So in a sense, it's trying to align yourself with that emotion.
No, it's not an emotion. It is the background of all emotions. It's not a particular emotion.
Okay.
The I am is not a particular experience. It is the background of all experience. I'm sure you've heard it before, let me give you one of my favorite images, that metaphors, the screen and the image. The TV screen and the movie. And this is it's a magical TV screen. It's a TV screen that has the ability to watch the movie that is playing on it. So this movie is not being watched by someone sitting on their sofa. The screen is watching the movie that is playing on it. Our own being, our own self-aware being, awareness, is in the same relationship to experience as the aware screen is to the movie. The screen never shows up as an object in the movie, but it is the background and reality of the movie. Likewise, the experience that shines in each of our minds as the knowledge I am, that is, the experience of being aware or awareness itself, is not a particular experience that is reached through practice or going through levels of emotion. It is the ever-present background of all experiences, the blissful ones, the awful ones, and the neutral ones. It cannot be reached by changing our experience, just like it's not possible. Changing programs doesn't make the screen more visible. It doesn't matter what is playing on the screen. The screen is equally visible in all movies.
So would you say even negative emotions are a different degree of love?
Yes, all emotions are ultimately made out of love. Yes.
So when you have a negative emotion,
That is love veiled.
love veiled?
Veiled. When you have a positive emotion, it's love unveiled.
Well, what do you mean by veiled?
In the same way that a movie veils the screen. Seems to veil the screen. So when happiness, let's call it happiness, when the innate happiness of our true nature is veiled, we call it unhappiness. And when it is no longer veiled, it shines as happiness.
Okay, and it's the mind that is veiling the love?
Yes, we could say it is the activity of the mind. The activity of the mind is like the activity of the movie. The activity of the mind seems to veil the screen. All there is to the movie is the activity of the screen. But when the screen vibrates in the form of the movie, it seems to veil itself. It loses itself in its own activity.
We don't control the movie though, right?
The one that controls the movie is a character in the movie. Or the one that thinks he controls the movie is one of the characters in the movie.
I think you lost me right there. I don't
You said, you asked if we controlled the movie.
The veiling of love. Okay, because every emotion is love, right? And then
ultimately, yes, but let's be clear that we're not being facile about emotions such as sorrow or depression. When we're in the emotion itself, it doesn't feel like love or peace. Its negative quality feels very real. But if we were to explore the reality of that feeling, we would eventually find its reality, which we could call love or happiness, yes.
But that experience, you're feeling love, right? Sometimes throughout the day. I don't understand. It's confusing how the mind could veil it if it's there.
In the same way that a movie seems to veil the screen. Let's go back to a conventional TV. You're sitting on your sofa now, you're watching TV. A movie comes on the TV, and you're so absorbed in the movie that you forget that you're seeing a screen. At the moment you forget that you're seeing a screen, the movie seems to become real, and you become involved in the movie. You become excited or fearful or sad or whatever. You become lost in the movie.
But the mind's doing that, right? Because you described consciousness as just pure love and pure understanding. So I'm trying to see where the veiling comes from.
Let's take out this the word love and understanding, because they have emotional. Let's be a little bit more neutral about it, at least to begin with. Think of consciousness or awareness just simply as the screen, if we can call it a screen, the screen upon which all your experience appears, or the space within which all your experience appears. And like the screen, it is colorless, qualityless, featureless. The reason I use the analogy of the screen is because a screen by itself, prior to the movie, is transparent. It's like empty space. It has no qualities, no features, no objective characteristics. So consciousness is like that. It is the screen or the space upon which or within which all your experience arises. So now, for instance, you're having thoughts, yes? And your thoughts are appearing and disappearing. Yeah? Now, anything that appears and disappears must appear and disappear in something or on something. Yeah? You can't have a cloud without a sky. You can't have an email without a screen. So what is the medium in which your thoughts are appearing?
I can't really describe it.
Okay, perfect. Why can't you describe it? And nor can I, except that I try to quite often. But but you're right. I shouldn't really, but because I can't really describe it. But why can't we describe it? You're absolutely right. Why can't you describe it?
I can't come up with a conceptualization of it.
Perfect. Why not?
Because anything would appear in it that
anything you could conceptualize would be something that appeared within it.
Yeah. It's kind of like a infinite mirror or something.
Perfect. So we use the analogy of the mirror because it has no color of its own, and yet it reflects all colors. So you're absolutely right. So if I were to ask you the same question about your emotions, not your current thoughts, but your current emotions, your feelings that also come and go like your thoughts. Your feelings also appear in a medium. What is that? Is it the same medium that your thoughts appear in, or a different medium? Is there one medium for your thoughts and another for your feelings?
It feels like I could separate them pretty easily.
No, you can separate your thoughts and your feelings easily, but what about that in which they both arise?
Yeah, I think they're the same medium, but almost like a different layer or something.
No, but the layers, go back to your original understanding. If they were layers, if they were different layers, you would be able to distinguish the two layers. And therefore the layers would have objective qualities to them, otherwise you couldn't distinguish them. Yeah, so that the layers would be something appearing in the space of consciousness, but they wouldn't themselves be the space of consciousness.
They have distinguishing qualities.
What do?
A thought and a
But
feeling.
I'm not asking you about the thoughts and the feelings. You're right, they have distinguishing qualities. That's why we can call one of them a thought and one of them a feeling. Otherwise they'd be the same. But a thought and a feeling aren't the same. They're different. Why? Because, as you rightly say, they have distinguishing qualities. But what about the space in which they both appear? Is it the same featureless space?
Yeah.
Or are there two different featureless spaces? And if there are two different featureless spaces, what is it that distinguishes them apart? Would only be a feature. So it must be the same featureless space, which is your experience. Yes?
Yes.
Now what about the sensation of your hand on the microphone? That's also an experience. It has qualities or features or characteristics, objective features, yes?
Yes.
All objective features must appear and disappear in something. What is this sensation appearing in?
The same space.
Perfect. And what about the sound of my voice? It's coming and going, it's an appearance, it has limited qualities. Anything that's limited must appear and disappear in something. What is the sound of my voice appearing in?
The space.
And the sight of this room?
You're basically saying that it's everything.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not saying
get it.
anything, I'm just asking you questions. I'm getting you to say it. So the last question, the sight of this room, presumably the same space, yes?
Yes.
Everything appears in the same space. And whatever our thoughts appear in, must itself be inherently free of thoughts, empty of thoughts. The thoughts appear in it, but the
Yes.
thoughts are not inherent to it, yes? And we can say the same for feelings, sensations and perceptions. In other words, the space of awareness or the space of consciousness in which our experience appears is inherently free of thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions. Yes? It is, in that sense, it is colourless, empty, transparent, as you said, like a mirror.
But I want you to go back to how the veiling happens.
Well, the veiling happens when this space vibrates within itself and colours itself with its own activity. Just like the space of a hologram appears in an empty space and seems to condition and as a result limit that space. So be open to the possibility that your entire experience is like a hologram, not in physical space, but in the knowing space of consciousness. After all, that is actually what you are experiencing. You've just agreed that all your experience takes place in the open, empty space of awareness. In other words, it is your experience that everything you experience is like a hologram in consciousness. And let me ask you one more question. Can you now travel with your attention beyond the field of awareness in which your experience appears?
I guess not, but
I don't like guessing. It's just...
I don't
it's
really
just,
get the
it's just,
question. Can you travel outside of your
Vi-
awareness?
visualize awareness like a physical space. It's not a physical space, it has no dimensions, but let's not go there now. For the moment, just visualize that awareness is like a vast knowing space. Everything you experience takes place inside it, as we've already discovered, your thoughts, your sensations, the sound of my voice. It all takes place in this vast empty space consciousness, yes?
Yes.
Now, with your attention, try to find the edge of the space in which your experience appears.
I cannot.
Can anybody here find the edge of the space in which their experience appears? And you're not a very good sample audience, but imagine asking this question to all 7 billion of us, those of us that are not interested in these matters, and we were to ask them the same question, presuming they understood the question. Can you, with your attention, travel to the edge of the field in which your experience appears? What would they say?
They cannot.
Has anybody ever, we have to imagine this of course, but can we imagine that anyone could ever travel to the edge of that space with their attention? Please say no.
No. Yes, but my question is really about how the veiling is happening.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I want to give you an example that is not just theoretical, because it won't satisfy you. You'll just come back with another objection. So I'm taking you step by step, slowly, experientially, because that will really satisfy you when you come to when you find the answer in your own experience. So far we've got to the fact that nobody has ever or could ever find anything outside the field of awareness in which their experience appears. We could never find the edge of that field. So that must mean, if we can never find the edge of awareness, we cannot legitimately claim that there is something outside awareness, because no one has ever been outside awareness. Yeah?
But it just leads to confusion, because I can't say that I have or haven't, or...
Well, you did say that you had never found the edge.
But that doesn't prove anything, it just means that I haven't.
Well, it's true, it doesn't prove it, but the fact that none of the 7 billion of us have ever been outside that space or could ever be outside that space is at least good reason for assuming that until someone does get outside that space, it's not possible. Yeah, can we agree on that?
Yeah, but it's still not satisfying because...
So, anything that appears in that space of consciousness cannot come from outside of it. We've just admitted no one's ever found the outside of consciousness. We don't know that there is such a place. So, if we stay scrupulously with our experience, we must admit that whatever we experience arises within consciousness. There's no other place from which experience could come. Yes? Now, we've also already admitted from our experience, not just through clever reasoning, but through a careful observation of our experience, that prior to the arising of experience, that is, prior to the arising of thoughts, sensations and perceptions, consciousness is empty. Like empty space, empty of thoughts, empty of feelings, empty of sensations. So now join the dots. Everything that we experience arises in consciousness, and therefore can only be made of the stuff that is in consciousness, which is consciousness. And that stuff is empty of all objective qualities or features. So it means literally that everything that we experience is arising in consciousness, in this transparent, empty, luminous space of consciousness. It arises in consciousness, it is known by consciousness, and it is made of consciousness. There's nothing else in consciousness other than consciousness with which experience could be made. So experience is literally like a hologram that appears in consciousness and experiences the activity of consciousness. Consciousness itself vibrates within itself and appears in the form of experience. That's what you're experiencing now, a movement of consciousness. That's all you're experiencing. It's all that's possible to experience is the movement of, or the activity of consciousness. And consciousness veils itself with its own activity. Just like, relatively speaking, a movie is a vibration of the TV screen. And the movie seems to veil the screen. In other words, the TV screen seems to veil itself with its own activity, which of course is no real veiling.
But where does the activity come from? In other words, in the screen, there's information there that it's veiling itself there. Where does the information come from?
Well,
the objects.
Take the information in your experience. Take any information that you are currently experiencing. Does it appear in consciousness?
Yes.
Was it put into consciousness from somewhere outside consciousness, or did it arise within consciousness?
It just appeared. So.
It just appeared. Did it appear from outside consciousness, or did it appear within consciousness? Was it like a person who started outside of this room and then walked into this room? Or was it more like the sound of my voice that arises from within this room? Where is the information? Was the information put into your consciousness from outside?
It's hard to say where it comes from.
Why? Perfect, but why?
Because I don't see it forming in a way. I just see the result. Okay.
Yes, you can't see it forming because that informs it itself has no qualities. So you can't see it. You can't see the place that it comes from. For the place from which it comes, transparent, empty consciousness, cannot be seen or known as an object. So if you look for the source of the information, you'll always say, I can't find it.
So where does the information come from?
From unfindable, unseeable consciousness. That's your experience. Does whatever information you know, does it not arise within consciousness?
Well, it leaves me unsatisfied because now I'm like, oh, stuff is appearing, but it's unaccountable. It's just appearing. It's a very unsatisfying state to be in.
It's unsatisfying because of your deep conviction, based on the materialistic culture that we've all been brought up in, that information must come from an objective source. And it's because of this deep conditioning in you, which you're not yet fully conscious that it is a conditioning in you. You think it's a fact. And because of that, any answer that I give you that is not in line with your conditioning, you find unsatisfactory. It's not my answers that are unsatisfactory, it's your conditioning that is unsatisfactory.
So how do you see information? You just see it as just coming up and it's fine, almost like letting go, I guess you're saying? Or how do you see the information coming up then? What's your point of view on that? Like the shapes and things that are happening.
Yes.
They're not coming from anywhere, right? Or
ultimately, they come from consciousness. I'm speaking about where they ultimately come from.
Right, yeah.
I'm not denying the fact that as transparent and empty consciousness assumes the form of experience, information, thoughts, feelings, that it doesn't, as it were, contract or coalesce through various levels. I'm not denying that there are not pathways through which infinite consciousness assumes the form of the finite mind, and those pathways may have established laws to them, or they may be repeating patterns that mean that repeating experiences or information occurs. I'm not suggesting that there's no structure to the unfolding of mind in consciousness. There obviously is, but I'm not really talking about the detailed structure. I'm talking at a more general level.
Right.
I'm not detailing the specific layers of contraction through which the infinite, formless, invisible consciousness assumes the form of a piece of information.
Right, so from that deeper level...
You could imagine infinite, formless, invisible consciousness. You could imagine it going through a series of contractions or localizations, and with each contraction it assumes a degree of form. More and more form, therefore more and more separation, more and more individuality, until the object is produced. It's just a model. I'm not suggesting it's an accurate model, but it would. So we could consider that there are pathways, there are laws to the various levels through which consciousness contracts within itself in order to appear as a thought or a feeling or a sensation, and that there are laws or habits or patterns to each of those pathways.
And that's what you call mind.
Yes, exactly. I call mind the activity of consciousness. As soon as consciousness starts vibrating within itself, I call that mind. A mind is not something separate from consciousness. All there is to mind or experience is consciousness. But mind would be consciousness in motion. Consciousness would be mind at rest. That would be a way to think of it. And I would call all of this mind. Thinking, sensing, perceiving, hearing, touching, tasting. All of that collectively we call mind. But mind, all of this would be the activity of consciousness, the movement of consciousness. Let me ask you one more question, just to make sure that we're trying to connect this to our experience. If I were to ask you now, are you experiencing anything other than the knowing of your experience? What would you say?
No.
Have you ever experienced anything other than the knowing of your experience?
No.
Could you ever experience anything other than the knowing of your experience?
No, probably not.
And what about if we ask the same three questions to all 7 billion of us? Have you ever experienced, do you ever experience, or could you ever experience anything other than the knowing of experience?
No.
How do we know there is anything other than the knowing of experience? In other words, how do we know that there is anything other than knowing or consciousness? Nobody has ever seen it. Nobody has ever or could ever experience anything other than knowing. Matter is the stuff that scientists believe exists outside knowing, outside consciousness. Nobody has ever seen it. And yet our culture is founded on the belief that it not only exists, but gives rise to consciousness. And we wonder why our world culture is in the precarious position that it is in now, with this as a basic worldview, this belief that this stuff called matter, which nobody has ever or could ever experience outside consciousness, gives rise to the only thing that is ever experienced, pure consciousness. That's how upside down, that's how back to front our culture is. And the price we pay for this is unhappiness in ourselves and conflicts between communities and nations. Nobody can tell us who we are. People can tell us about objects, but nobody can tell us about ourselves. That is a non-objective discovery that has to be made for ourselves, by ourselves, in ourselves. If thought turns its attention away from the objects which it seems to know, turns its attention back on itself, it ceases to be thought and is revealed as pure consciousness. This open, empty, dimensionless, objectless awareness that we essentially are is not limited by any of the thoughts, feelings, sensations, or perceptions that appear within it. It was present prior to the appearance of the body-mind. It is present during the appearance of the body-mind, and it remains present after the disappearance of the body-mind. That is not something we discover when we die. We can discover it any moment. All we know of the body-mind is a collection of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. And these are continuously appearing and disappearing. But you have never appeared or disappeared. Numerous times every day we experience the appearance and disappearance of the body-mind world. But we never experience the disappearance of ourselves. This is the great discovery to be made about ourselves, and this discovery is the source of true peace and happiness. What I essentially am does not share the limits or the destiny of the body-mind. And until we have made this discovery about ourselves, we cannot really know what anything truly is, because everything appears in conformity with our belief about ourselves. If we think I am a temporary, limited self, we will think that the world is a temporary, limited world. Everything appears in conformity with our understanding of ourselves.